So today we're going to provide you just kind of a broad overview of the DBE program. So let's get started. Take a look at our agenda for today. We're going to be addressing, the rules that affect the DBE certification, and these generally fall under the Code of Federal Regulations. 49 CFR Part 26 is the overall DBE regulations. There are specific sections that deal with certification, primarily Subpart D and Subpart E of the overall regulations. So most of today is going to cover those types of regulations. There were some significant changes to the regulations back in late 2014 in October. These are called the DBE Final Rules. And under the final rule, some changes impact the certification program. So we'll talk about those. We're also going to address, why are you getting certified? Why would you pursue certification? And then, more importantly, what is the DBE certification? What exactly do you get when you get certified as a disadvantaged business enterprise? And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about the process, and when you go through certification, what is the process that you're going through so you understand it a little bit better. And then we're going to address, what happens after certification. What do you do once you have your certification? What are the next steps? What are the things that you'd like to do, or what are the things you should do after being certified? So a couple of the major changes that affect certification include, and this is under the final rule, suspension, being suspended primarily for not being responsive, for not providing documentation. We're going to talk a little bit about an annual affidavit that's submitted and a 5-year renewal process that's required. But you're provided a certain amount of time to provide data back to the certifying agency, and we'll talk about that here in a minute as well. But if you fail to provide that information in the adequate time, then it's likely that you're going to have your certification suspended and eventually even revoked, or you'll be decertified. There are also some grounds for removal, and then there's an appeals process. Should you be deemed not eligible or not certified, there is an appeal process that you can pursue if you so elect. So let's talk about what is a DBE. Now, as I mentioned, a DBE is a disadvantaged business enterprise, and this is a confusing term for a lot of people. A DBE is really only applicable on United States Department of Transportation projects. So when we look at these federally funded contracts that come from the Federal Transit Administration, the Federal Highway Administration, or the Federal Aviation Administration, these three models of U.S. DOT contracts include the DBE program. Anything else that you see outside of these three generally will not be considered a DBE, I guess, program or subject to the DBE program rules. Now, you will see, for example, with state funded here in California, a disabled veteran business enterprise designation or a small business enterprise under the Department of General Services. And those are great certifications to have, but that's not what we're talking about today. There are also cities, counties, and public utilities that have their programs. For example, the California Public Utilities Commission has a separate program under their supplier clearinghouse that will certify minority business, women business, and LGBT businesses, and disabled veteran businesses. And again, this is not that program. Cities have their own. Sometimes they'll have small business or minority business programs that are sometimes have preferences for local or community businesses. And again, this is not that program. And so the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program is a very broad program that impacts federally funded projects from, again, the FTA, the FHWA, and the FAA. So let's talk about what is a DBE firm. Now, what the regulation describe is a socially disadvantaged owner that is both socially and economically disadvantaged and owns 51 or more of the entity itself. Now, when we look at a disadvantaged business and we look to those socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, these individuals can be United States citizens or permanent residents, and they generally include 6 separate groups that are presumed to be disadvantaged. These groups include the Black American group, the Native American group, the Subcontinent Asian American group, the Pacific Asian American group, the Hispanic American group, and women as a gender. So you have 5 ethnicities and 1 gender group. So the 6 groups are presumed to be disadvantaged in terms of socially and economically. Now, there is an other group that can be certified, but those groups, that other group, that could be any individual. It could be any ethnicity, including white males. Could be individuals, for example, from the Middle East or from Europe. Regardless of their ethnicity, they can be certified, but they must meet the threshold of now providing evidence that they in fact have been socially and economically disadvantaged. So the presumption is that these 6 groups that we just talked about have that status. In addition to being a firm that is at least 51% owned by a socially and economically disadvantaged individual, the business must be a for-profit business. It has to be independently owned by that individual, and that individual must control and manage the daily operations of the business. Right? So this is an important requirement, as we'll talk about here in the few slides. So as we look to, what is a DBE? A DBE has to be a small business concern. By definition, every small business that's defined under the Small Business Act or the SBA through the Small Business Administration, under those regulations, any small business there can be a DBE if they fall under the, again, the group that we just talked about, socially and economically disadvantaged, and they must have an average annual gross receipts, right, as we take the previous 3-year average, no greater than $23.98 million. Now, that is subject to additional thresholds depending on the type of work that the firm does. For example, if you are an engineering firm or an architectural firm, then that threshold may be limited to, for example, $7 million. But under no circumstance can the revenues exceed $23.98 million as an average annual gross receipts for the previous 3 years. So then what is a DBE? Well, the DBE must also be, the owner, the qualified owner must also have a personal net worth that does not exceed $1.32 million or $1,320,000. And that excludes the owner's interest in the business and any of the equity in their primary residence. So when we look at personal net worth, we're going to exclude the business and exclude the personal residence. Now, for those that are married individuals, we will also consider the community property status here in California, and thereby, in most cases, 50% of the community property will be counted toward the individual's personal net worth. So there are really 4 criteria that we're talking about. Ownership by a woman or a minority, and this is for presumption of the qualification. It has to be independent and controlled by that woman or minority or women or minorities. You're subject to size limitations of $23.98 million in gross receipts as an average over the last 3 years, and then your personal net worth may not exceed $1.32 billion. Those are the key requirements for DBE certification. So now, why would you want to get certified, right? What's in it for you, right? As a small business, you're thinking, well, I want to get certified. I'd like to grow my business. I'd like to capture more work as it relates to perhaps Caltrans work, or perhaps FTA work, or FAA work. And why would you want to be certified? Well, cities, counties, public utilities, they use DBEs on projects with federal funding. So for an example, the Federal Highway Administration will allocate funds directly to the state DOTs. And in California's case, we're talking about Caltrans. So the FHWA will award and allocate monies directly to Caltrans, and then Caltrans in turn will now fund those dollars down to local agencies. And these local agencies could include, for example, OCTA here in Orange County, or LA Metro, or perhaps San Bernardino County Transportation Authority, or the Riverside County Transportation Commission, or it could include the San Diego Association of Governments, and so forth. It could also include cities. So it could include a city that is looking to repair a bridge, a portion of the highway in their streets, and so forth. So it's important that you understand that it's not just work that's coming from Caltrans, or coming from the FTA, or coming from the Federal Aviation Administration. It's also work that is funded through cities, counties, and other regional transportation groups that have been earmarked with FTA, FHWA, and FAA dollars. It does enhance the ability to market yourselves to prime contractors for several reasons. The primary reason is that many of these projects include DBE contract goals, and these goals are included in the solicitations, and the prime contractor is required to exercise good faith efforts to meet those goals. So when a prime contractor is looking for a subcontractor and they're looking for to meet the contract goal, they're going to be looking first to DBE firms that are certified. Now, if you are a non-certified, non-DBE small business, you may be able to get on the team, but the likelihood of a prime looking to a DBE first is very great. So it is a benefit for you to market yourself to the prime contractors pursuing these federally funded projects. So a couple of things with regards to the certification process, and then we're going to jump into the actual certification application, is that you're going to need information to put your application together. So if you've recently started your business, or if you've had your business for several years, it doesn't matter. You're going to need to understand what NAICS codes do you fall under. And this is the North American Industrial Classification System code system, and we provided a URL here. But the application itself is going to ask you, what NAICS codes are you competent in? Are you qualified to perform in? And as we go through the certification review process, the reviewer will ask you for evidence as it relates to your NAICS codes to ensure that you are in fact qualified to perform work under those NAICS codes. There is also Caltrans DBE information that's available to you at the Caltrans site. The actual application itself is available online at either the DOT site for the California DOT or Caltrans site, or the CUCP site. We've provided you with a link here for that application. As it relates to small business size standards, if you're not sure what size standard is applicable to your primary NAICS code, that's available here through the SBA Small Business Size Standards link. And then lastly, Caltrans also provides work codes. So when you get your DBE certification through Caltrans or through the certifying agencies here in California, very likely that the work codes will also be identified for your firm. So it's important that you look at those work codes to ensure that they cover the work that you're doing. So now we're going to go ahead and just kind of quickly go through the certification process. I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's just a very straightforward process. What we will do is focused on specific areas of the application that you should be aware of. These are areas that have in the past caused problems for small businesses that are seeking certification, or may not be as clear as they appear when you look at them at first glance. So the application itself starts off on page 1 here with both a DBE application and an airport concession DBE application. Now, for most of you, you're going to be looking to the DBE portion of this because unless you're pursuing a concession type application or certification with the airport, then you would be focused on the DBE application as it applies to this application. So a couple of quick things with regards to the application on page 1. I'm not going to read this to you, and I'm not going to make you read it, but generally it's what we just kind of covered. We identified, should I apply, and we talk about specifically what rules are going to be applicable with regards to ownership, your disadvantaged status in terms of, being one of the named minorities or women, and your size standard. How do I apply? There are certifying agencies here in California, and Susan, do we know how many agencies there are? 15?
I believe so, and we have a roster of certifying agencies as a form that we can provide.
So that's available on our website as well as part of the materials that are available to you. So if you're looking to get certified, for example, here in Southern California, there are currently 2 certifying agencies in Southern California, which include Los Angeles, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, or I'm sorry, the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority, or also known as LA Metro, or the City of Los Angeles. These are your 2 options here. Your third option here in Southern California is to go directly to Caltrans. So you can submit your information directly to Caltrans. One of the benefits of using LA Metro is that they currently have transitioned to an online application system, which makes it very efficient for you, and it's much more time, I guess, efficient as well, because the process is likely to be quicker than the other. Now, the LA Metro automated certification process is relatively new. Susan, what is it, in the last 6 months?
Yeah, exactly. I think now they're primarily doing online applications. You still could submit a hard copy application, but I would say over the last few months they've gone just primarily to online application.
And so we certainly, if you're able to do that, we certainly would recommend that to you, because you can upload all your documents and you can essentially walk through that process, from the comforts of your own home, right? So let's move on to the next slide. So again, this is the instructions, real straightforward. Now, this is basic information. This is all information you should have, and so it's important that you look at this maybe before you start to fill it out, because if you're doing it online, or if you're filling it out at your, using the PDF version of the application, it's important that you gather as much information as you can before you start to fill out the application. So moving on to the next page, this is actually page 5 of the certification. We want to know if you have had prior applications. If you have, you need to provide that information, and essentially provide information as it relates to that prior application. Page 5 also asks you for a business profile, so this is important that you provide information about your business and specific to the work that you're performing and are qualified to perform. On this page, you'll see under item 2 that you also have the applicable NAICS codes. Now, I want to caution you that don't go into the NAICS code link and start pulling down a bunch of NAICS codes that you think you might be interested in performing, because what will happen, as we'll talk about, I think at the end of this webinar, is that you will be required to show evidence that you in fact are qualified to perform the work under each NAICS code that you include in your application. And that's generally done through a site visit. So the site visitor will come in and ask you to provide either a contract, a purchase order, invoices, resumes, project descriptions, any information that will show that you in fact have experience and qualifications to perform that work. So moving on to page 6 here, we have to have a for-profit business. So if you are a nonprofit, you are not eligible to submit an application, and you will not be certified as a disadvantaged business enterprise firm. So you have to be a for-profit business. You need to describe the structure of your business. So those of you that are sole proprietors, it'll simply be that. But if you do have a different structure, then we need to identify that information. And then you also need to identify the number of employees you have. And then you need to provide your gross receipts from the year that the last 3 years from the date of your application. Now here, if you're a relatively new firm, then you only include those years that are applicable for you as a new firm. If you're a brand new firm, right, where you have no gross receipts for a full year, then you provide the information you have for the year, for the period you have available. Moving on to the next page here, still page 6. This is now looking at relationships and dealings with other businesses, and primarily the reason why we're asking this information is to determine whether or not you have relationships with large businesses that may be owning the business, or you may have other family members or even your spouse that might be, they have interest in the business and so forth. So it's important that you describe any relationships you have with other businesses so that that information can be properly vetted by the certifying agency. All right, next slide, please. So now here, essentially we're looking at the majority owner information. If you are the majority owner, then you obviously include your information, your home information, this is a very important information to describe, again, your ethnicity, whether or not you're a U.S. citizen or a resident, number of years as the owner, the percentage you own. So let's say, for example, you are 100% owner. That's a simple application, but let's say you are a 51% owner, then you would include that. If you are less than a 51% owner and there are 2 of you, for example, 2 individuals that are both minorities that own perhaps 80% of the business, and each of you may own 40% of the business, and a third party that's a non-qualified individual owns the other 20%, then you would simply include your portion of the ownership here, and we would need another application for the other qualified owner so that together you would meet your 51% or more ownership. You also would include any type of, if you are a stock corporation, for example, you would include the stock owned and when you've acquired the stock or the equity in the business, and so forth. This is important that you describe as much information as you can as you complete this information. So now we're going to be looking at additional ownership information, any kind of family relationships with other owners. And again, this is primarily meant to establish whether you're relying upon a spouse or a father or parent or sibling, really for you to operate the business. So it's important that when you look at this that you're sure that you in fact have the eligibility and the qualifications to run your business. And we're now moving on to additional ownership information. So again, talking about family, providing information if you in fact have relationships with other owners that are family members or employees. And this again helps understand, are you in fact controlling the company? If your father, for example, is an employee of yours and he has 35 years of experience working in a specific field and you may only have a couple years experience, then there's a presumption that you are relying upon his experience and his network to manage and control the company. So we have to be very careful here when you do have those family owners or family employees to describe that so that you in fact can show that you have the ability to control and operate the business. Anything else on this page that we should cover?
I would add for question number 4B, if you do hold a trust, I would provide a copy of the trust for review to the certifying agency.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Susan, because what happens in the trust, when you have family trusts or you have any types of trust, many times those trusts will, when the reviewer looks at this, it'll uncover that in fact somebody else will ultimately have control or have ownership, where it's maybe a temporary transfer of ownership, or it might be later transfer of ownership at a later date and so forth. So these trusts are going to be looked at very carefully. So when you do have a trust, I'll just want to share with all of you that it is a red flag. It is something that the reviewer will be looking for. And if they find it later, because they will be looking at your tax returns, then again, the red flag is going to get even redder if you don't disclose that you in fact have a trust, especially as it relates to your business. All right, control. Here what we do essentially is walk through the officers and the board of directors and who they are and what their titles are, when they were appointed, their ethnicity, and so forth. And then this is important, especially when you have multiple owners, like in the case of the 50% owner, or any time you have multiple owners that make up the majority of the ownership to meet the eligibility criteria. So in addition to that, it's also going to be looked at for purposes of, when we look at your tax return, or when you're looking at the statement of information for the state of California, or any other documents. They're just going to follow it. They're going to confirm that in fact the information you're providing here is current, accurate, and complete.
And this would apply if your business is a corporation, or if in the case of a, let's say, limited liability company, if your operating agreement, if you have officers in your company, you can add that information here.
And so Susan, one question I guess is, if you are for example, a limited liability company, and you have 2 co-managers, but maybe you don't have officers, would you include the managers here under the officers?
Correct, correct.
So that's an important distinction as well for those of you that may be an LLC. Moving on to page 9, this is again more information about the management, who is providing the management and supervisory functions of the company, and you need to include that here in this section. In addition to that, you need to also describe whether or not any of these individuals also own or work for any other firms, or have relationships with any other firms. And this is important. If you answer here yes, again, you'll be subject to additional scrutiny, because again, many times other firms may be involved in helping a firm get certified for purposes of bringing more work to that firm, especially when there are agreements for subcontracting or exclusive teaming agreements and so forth. Okay, now we're going to get into just a lot of detail about who does what here. Who, in terms of the duties of the owners, the officers, directors, managers, and key personnel, what we're looking for here is who's responsible for what. And this information is very important, so you have to make sure that when you complete this, you think about who's doing what for your company, and you describe it complete here as we go through this section. So here's more of the same, just asking about, who does what, and whether it's, you're doing it always, you do it frequently, you do it seldom, or you never do it. Moving on here now to equipment and vehicles. This is more important for firms that are either equipment suppliers, material suppliers, or construction firms that have equipment and or vehicles for a couple of reasons. But it's important that you identify the make and model of your equipment and or your vehicles, and you describe how you are, if you own them or lease them. It's important because if you're leasing from a large firm and essentially you are using their equipment, or perhaps the equipment doesn't belong to you, it belongs to a different firm, this is where that kind of a situation will be uncovered. And then similarly with office space. Some of you have home office locations, and that's okay. So when you do have a site visit conducted, it will come out to your home office, and they're going to want to see that you have a work area. Very likely the site visit will take pictures of your home office, so it's important that if you are working from home, that you've designated a workspace in your home for the work that you're doing. Moving on, storage space. This again is important if you are an equipment supplier, a material supplier, or anybody that is doing work that requires storage or warehouse space. Moving on to financial banking information. They're going to want to get information about your bank or banks, depending on the situation, and identifying any sources, amounts, or purposes of any money that's been loaned to your firm from not only the bank, but from any other individual. You need to identify the source of any funds that are invested or provided to your firm, and that's what this has done. And that's important because if you have contribution amounts that are being provided by others other than yourself, then that needs to be disclosed. But it's also important because part of the requirement is that you as the owner must contribute to the firm, right? So whether you have contributed something as little as $1,000 just to get the business running and get it started, when you do that, and this is key for any new business, it's important that you consider establishing a separate bank account, a separate account, business account outside of your personal account, and you show that money has in fact gone into that account from your personal account, so that you're able to distinguish what's personal and what's business related. This is an area that, although it seems small, it's important to establish the initial contribution into a company, especially if you have multiple owners. You want to show that monies have been transferred into that account by those owners that are seeking certification and are either eligible or qualified to be certified as a minority or women owner. Okay, so now we are looking at the contribution types. Is there anything here we need to cover with regards to the first section?
This would just only apply if you have had any transfers of assets within the past 2 years.
So, and this is important because, again, if you have assets that came into your possession and in the last 2 years, you're going to have to explain, you're going to describe it here, but eventually you're going to have to explain it. And then the next section here of current licenses and permits by the owner or the employer firm. This is key if you are an engineering firm, an architectural firm, or a contractor with a contractor's license, because one of the areas that will be looked to is whether or not you or one of the qualifying owners has the license. Is the license in their name? Is whether it's an engineering license, an architectural license, or some kind of contractor license. If it's not, then it's going to be, it could be a big hurdle for you when you're relying on somebody else's license to manage and operate for example, your construction business. So now here, if we are in business, have been in business for some time, we want to make sure you describe your 3 largest contracts completed by your firm in the last 3 years. If you have not completed any contracts in the last 3 years, for example, you're just recently started your business, then you need to describe any work that you currently have in this section. Moving on to listing the 3 largest active jobs and which your firm is currently working. These are now current jobs as opposed to completed jobs. And again, if you don't have more than, or at least 3, then you describe the project you currently have.
One thing I would like to add here is if you are a construction firm and you have an active job site near your primary office, then the reviewer may stop by the job site during the site visit. So in addition to visiting your office, the reviewer would also stop by the job site as well if you have an active job.
So we're going to move on to the affidavit. The affidavit is really important, right? Because for a couple of reasons. One, it has to be notarized. So you're basically stating in your affidavit that everything you provided is true and correct, right? That you are who you are, and that you understand the information that you're providing, you understand the questions, and that now you are essentially certifying that you are the person you said you are, that you are, in fact, one of the groups that have been established here, and you can see here on the screen that we're talking about a female, Black American, Hispanic American, Native American, Asian Pacific American, subcontinent Asian American, or other. And if you fall under the other, then you must describe your ethnicity here under other. Again, this is very important because it is subject to, potential civil and maybe even criminal penalties here. If you read the statement in the capital letters, it says the false statement to any and all civil and criminal penalties available pursuant to the applicable federal and state law. So it's important that if you're not sure about something, you ask somebody. You can ask us. We're happy to help you. We will provide you with information here at the end of this webinar, but you can also ask the certifying agency, depending on who you're going through, and you can certainly go to Caltrans's DBE Certification Unit, and they have information on their website. So any questions you have at all during the certification application process, please make sure you ask if you're not sure about the information you're providing. Moving on, there is a checklist that you're going to be completing, and it's required that you provide this information when you submit your application. So here's the example. Now, Susan, I believe as we go through this, there are going to be information that's required for everybody, right? And that's what this is on this page.
Correct.
So here's an example of what you're going to see, right? The personal net worth statement, your federal tax returns for the last 3 years, federal tax returns for your company for the last 3 years, proof of any contributions you provided, so whether it's a check or a bank statement, signed loan, security statements, any equipment you own, on and on and on. You can see here, this is everybody, regardless of the structure of your business, will need to provide this information. Next slide. So on the next slide now, we're going to now include additional information that's required depending on the structure of your business. So, for example, if you are a partnership or a joint venture, you have specific information that's required, which essentially would include the agreement that shows that your partnership agreement or your joint venture agreement. If you're a corporation or LLC, you'll have the articles of incorporation, the stock certificate, the ledger information, the minutes of all of your board of director meetings, especially the first one, but certainly all of them up until that date, and so forth. So other optional documents that could be provided depending on request by the certifying agency could include your proof of citizenship or insurance agreements, or perhaps your financial statements, and so forth. So just depending on the situation, you may be asked for additional information. Okay, just quickly going to just describe the personal net worth statement document. This is the document that's going to be required with your application. This, correct me if I'm wrong here, Susan, but even on the online application, is this something that gets uploaded? The individual must complete it, for example, PDF, and then upload it into the application system?
Exactly, yeah. You would have to complete this form, and this form would also, it needs to be notarized as well.
So this is a second form that needs to be notarized. And here, generally, you're going to be providing your information about yourself. Now, I'm going to defer to Susan here for the second page here on slide, the next slide over. Now here, does the individual need to worry about removing, for example, the community property portion of their assets, or does the reviewer do that for them?
One thing to know, I would, if you go back to this slide, if you are married, it's important to include your spouse's full name. And so when the reviewer will look at that, then we would take into account community property if you're in a community property state.
Okay, very good. And so when we get to this page now, so you're going to need, as the applicant, you complete this as is, and then you rely upon the reviewer to calculate the final, for example here, net worth. So if my net worth, for example, with my spouse was $1.6 million and it exceeded the $1.32 million, will the reviewer automatically say, wow, this individual is married, he's in a community property state, then I'm going to take half of that and use $800,000, or does the applicant need to do that themselves?
I think typically the reviewer would do that, so you should report all of your assets in full, and again, you just make a note that you are married.
Okay, thank you. So it's important that when you fill this out, because what will happen is the information you provide here on this lead sheet here, this page that we currently have on the screen, most of this information will require additional detail. As you'll see here, for example, if you look at the first section here, the retirement accounts, that's going to be section 3. So we'll go to section 3 and see that you'll have additional information required here on section 3 describing the security or the broker account or the retirement account. Let's say it's a 401k or a pension account, the amount, the market value, the date that you've gotten the quotation exchange, and then the total value of that account. So what I recommend is when you're doing this, for example, let's start with this retirement account, is print out, if you have, for example, an IRA account or a 401k account, and you have it with Schwab or Fidelity or Principal, whomever, I would go and print the pages that are the summary for the account amount so that you have that information in your file should you be requested or audited or challenged on these amounts. Now I'm going to talk about section 2. These are notes payable to banks. So similarly, when you have loans outstanding, this goes to your liability. If you do have a loan, a line of credit, or a loan that is a business loan from your business to, I guess, from a bank to your business, then here you would also want to describe this to address this from a liability standpoint. Now let's go back here real quick. Just a quick summary of what is included here. We have various items that are going to be included under your assets, which is the left-hand side of the form, and then your liabilities, which are on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, you can see that in addition to what we just talked about, there's also real estate, excluding your primary residence, right? There's also life insurance. Those of you that may have any cash surrender value to your life insurance, it's important to include that. Personal property and assets, generally that's going to be household information unless you own other personal property that is of great value. You want to include that information here. And then any other business interests you have. So if you own another company or part of another company or have as an investor in another company, you want to divulge that here. On the liability side, we talked a little bit about the loan on life. Actually, we haven't talked about the loan on life insurance is an important one. The mortgages. This is important because if you have, for example, a rental property, or you have other properties that is not your personal residence, then if you have a mortgage on those properties, then you would want to include that liability here. Any notes, obligations, any kind of information as it relates to loans, any notes and accounts payable to banks, could include credit cards, for example. You would include here any other liabilities you may have, and then unpaid taxes. So if you know, for example, that you're completing this application in the middle of the year, and last year your taxes for your business were $15,000. Then, and you have not paid that tax, you haven't made quarterly payments, or you've deferred taxes, then you can include any unpaid taxes based on previous year taxes here. So let's go ahead and move on. We've kind of talked about this, and then this is, go back that one. Is this for your real estate? So here, just real quick, my recommendation to you is to make sure you have some supporting documentation for the value of the business. When you look at purchase price, you should be able to have that from your records. But when you look at the market value, Susan, you probably see a lot of these. Do people typically use like Zillow or Redfin or?
Right, you could do Zillow, or sometimes they'll just know maybe comparables in the neighborhood. You could put that, but I think the best source would be Zillow. Yeah,
and again, you could print it out and keep it in your file so you have a record of what Zillow is saying your market value is for your property. So that's important that you provide that information. Okay, next slide. Here it's continuation. Life insurance, we don't need to get into these details here, but that's important that you provide that. This is the other personal property, your automobile, your household stuff, anything else. Any investments you have, any other liabilities, unpaid taxes, and so forth. So this is pretty straightforward information. And then you would have to sign it, and as Susan mentioned, this would also need to be notarized. This is some of the supplemental document checklist that may be required. This includes information such as, principal place of business. Are you authorized to do business in California? For example, if you're an out-of-state company, let's say you're out of Nevada or out of Arizona, you want to make sure that the person is qualified to do business in the state of California. You want to list all your office locations in California so that the reviewer understands that, and so forth. So there's additional information that is part of the supplemental questionnaire. And then you want to identify where you want to work. So some of you may have very specific type of work. For example, if you're in construction, well, you may only want to work in several counties, right? You might want to work in LA County, maybe Orange and Riverside County, or on the other hand, if you're doing engineering work, or you're doing other work that's more in the professional services area, you may work statewide, and you may hit, the 00 box there and say, hey, I'll work anywhere in the state. So depending on the nature of your work, you would list where you are, willing to work or prefer to work within the state of California. So now when you have all this completed, you're ready to submit, you want to include in your cover letter any projects that you're bidding on. So for example, if you're going to LA Metro for a certification and you're bidding on as a subcontractor on an LA Metro project, and maybe the prime has said, hey, we'll put you on the team, but you need to be certified as a DBE, you want to include that. You want to include it if you are bidding on a job that has DBE contract goals, because this will help expedite your application so that we, as a reviewer, may be able to provide you with the certification prior to the due date of that bid or proposal. Anything else here we need to talk about?
One thing I want to add is I don't believe Caltrans has an expedited process. They review their applications in date order, but an agency, for example, such as Metro, if you are bidding on a Metro project, they do have an expedite process.
So it's very important to understand that. Okay, so here are some information about the certifying agencies. I think we talked about this earlier in the very beginning. For Riverside, Imperial, San Diego, and even Los Angeles County, you'll see that these are all looking to the same two agencies. We're looking at the City of LA and the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority, or LA Metro. These are the two key, the only two certifying agencies in Southern California. And then lastly, you can always go to Caltrans. You can submit these directly to Caltrans, and they will also review and process your application. So quickly, I want to talk about the site visits. This is going to happen. They do 100% site visits. So when you submit an application, you can expect to be visited by the reviewer. Sometimes this is outsourced to consultants that do help the certifying agency perform the site visit. So it may not be specifically, for example, LA Metro or the City of LA, or it may not be Caltrans, that you may be visited by maybe another certifying agency. For example, if you went to Caltrans, City of LA or Los Angeles airports may come in and perform the site visit on behalf of Caltrans. Or if you are certifying with Metro, they may hire a consultant to come out and perform the site visit. So there's kind of been a rumor that your certification is only good for 5 years. That's not true. There is currently no end date to your certification. The way it works is you are certified, and as long as you are meeting the annual declaration form, which typically is going to hopefully be a no change form, but you declare whether or not there have been changes. If you haven't had any changes to your ownership status or to the corporate structure, then you just simply submit that annual declaration form, and then in 5 years you'll be asked to submit a renewal application that will be required every 5 years. But generally there is no certification termination date. You're good until you're removed. Let's talk a little bit about what happens after certification, right? So what we see a lot is firms go out and get certified, and once they get certified, they just keep doing what they're doing. They come back sometimes and say, why aren't we getting any work? The certification isn't working for me. It's not what I expected. The certification itself is a very important certification, because what it does is, as a minority or as a woman-owned firm or as a socially economically disadvantaged individual, you are provided a preference. This is essentially an aspirational program for goal purposes, but it's a preference program. It's a preference program in that when the goals are set on some of these large federally funded contracts, the prime contractor is going to look to a certified DBE firm first. And as a result of that, right, this is a very scrutinized program. And when I say scrutinized, it's scrutinized in that you can see by what we just went through, there's a lot of intrusive information, a lot of detail about yourself, about who you are, about how much money you make, about what work you do, about who owns your business, and so forth. Because what happens is we don't want individuals that are not eligible to participate in this program, because we are providing both a race and gender preference to those individuals to participate in this program. As a result of that, you are in a very unique situation. For example, if we were to look at Caltrans funded projects, and many of these Caltrans funded projects here in this region are allocated to the local agency, so Caltrans would receive the federal highway dollars, and then they would in turn allocate those dollars to a local transportation agency such as LA Metro or the Orange County Transportation Authority or the San Bernardino County Transportation Authority, and they in turn would issue the RFP. So an example, the I-405 here in Orange County that was just recently awarded to a joint venture team by the name of OC405 Partners has a 16% DBE goal. Because it's design build, very small portion of that goal was met when the contract was awarded. So now this design builder now must go out and find DBE firms to meet that 16%. And so if you are certified and they're looking for the work that you do, you have a high likelihood to get on the team, to get on their team. 16%. So that's a $1.3 billion project, and I did the math the other day, but we're talking about over $200 million in DBE, almost $200 million actually, in DBE awards. The San Bernardino County Transportation Authority recently, well, actually, they just awarded part of that contract, but they're going to be issuing a design build contract for the I-10 extension, widening of the I-10. same situation. They have approximately 10 to 12% DBE goal, and they're going to be looking to the prime contractor to reach out to DBE certified firms to meet that goal. RCTC, the Riverside County Transportation Commission, they recently issued a contract or an RFP for the design build of the I-15 express lane project. They just recently awarded that to, I believe, Skanska Ames, and that particular design build project has a 10% goal, and that's estimated to be about $400 million. So you're looking at about $40 million worth of DBE participation. So the projects are there, the opportunities are there for you. So after you get certified, it's important that when you come to a prime contractor, that you have your act together, right? You want to come in and you say, here's my line card. A line card could be a capability statement. It could be a flyer about yourself. But it's important that you say, okay, here are my NAICS codes. Here's the profile of my work. Here are some of my previous clients. And here's my license. Here's the information I have, right? Very important to describe that. In addition to that, you want to have perhaps, an elevator speech prepared so that you could quickly, at these networking events and at these events that are going to be available to you, you can quickly say, here are my qualifications. Here's what we do. Here's the kind of work that we are, experienced in. Here's the work we're good at doing, and this is why you should hire us, right? So very important that you do that. Third, you need to network. There are plenty of network opportunities out there for you. We, as a service to Caltrans, provide information. We have an event calendar that is available to all of you through our website, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But that calendar identifies many events in the region that are available to you to attend. We also provide information about pre-bid meetings and about RFPs that are out there through our automatic bid matching system that is available to any DBE that is participating in the supportive services contract. But you have so many opportunities to network, and I personally, even though we live in the world of technology, I personally recommend that you go out and network. You need to see people face to face. You need to shake their hand. You need to know these people, because many times it's something as simple as a 2-minute meeting that you have with somebody at Skanska or somebody at Parsons or somebody at the firm you're pursuing work with that'll remember you and provide you that opportunity. So I strongly suggest that you go out and network. And then there's these websites. Now, we provide you a list of bidding opportunity websites out there for you, but there are plenty of websites out there that you can become, you can register for, and you can get automatic notifications of opportunities. So I strongly recommend that.